Joining me now, Karl Rove, former Deputy Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Karl, always good to have you with us as well. I should just mention we're in the middle of this press briefing at the White House. We may dip in there for just a moment if there's some news coming out of there. The thinking now is that this would be unlikely to pursue a prosecution by the FBI prior to the election, given the sort of unspoken rule, or maybe it is spoken, 60 days prior to an election, they wouldn't pursue this kind of case. What do you think about that, Karl?
I think that's likely, and I also find it unusual. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but it just strikes me that there are people who've got some liability here. I'm not certain it necessarily yet is the president. You know, having read that document, the FBI developed evidence after they received the boxes, the 15 boxes in January. They developed evidence, meaning that they had somebody who told them those weren't all the boxes that had classified material. Mm-hmm. So the FBI had somebody inside who said, well, you think you got all the White House documents, but you didn't, and they're more classified documents. That's why they seek and get the subpoena. They then meet, they meet on June 3rd. They're turned over more boxes, and the person who has liability, in my opinion, is the custodian of the former president's documents, who signs an affidavit saying, we got your subpoena, we did a diligent search, we checked everything, we found all the documents that are responsive to your subpoena, and here they are, and we didn't keep copies of them. And they say in the filing, the Department of Justice and the FBI say they have multiple sources who said to them there are more classified documents, and they're not just in the storage room, and some of them may be have moved from the storage room elsewhere. And remember, on June 3rd, the FBI Director of Counterintelligence, who's leading the group of people who are accepting the document, says, can I look through these other boxes here? And the president's lawyer says, no, we've already conducted the diligent search. The custodian who signed that certification saying there are no more classified documents is in trouble, because when they do the raid on August 8th, they say twice as many documents were classified remaining in the boxes in the storage closet than they picked up from them voluntarily on the 3rd of June. So somebody's going to get in trouble. My hope is that this thing goes quiet until after the election, and that we see more transparency at the appropriate time, meaning the affidavit and how they developed this, but these additional sources of evidence. But they've got at least 3 instances where somebody inside Mar-a-Lago said, January boxes those weren't all the classified documents. What they turned over to you on June 3rd is not all the classified documents, and some of the documents are no longer in that room. They've been moved elsewhere in Mar-a-Lago, and some of them have always been elsewhere in Mar-a-Lago than the storage room.
Yeah, it obviously begs a lot of questions. Why remove certain documents? My biggest question is what was in those documents, and why would they want to hold on to them, specifically those documents? Why would they want to hold those back? But one of the problems is that's its own situation that the DOJ is investigating, and the Trump side has their lawyers and their feelings about what was rightfully his and able to take. But it's just interesting.
Let's be clear. Let's be clear on this. None of these government documents are his to have taken. I agree with the deputy director who said that a lot of the former president's problems are of his own creation. You can, under the Presidential Records Act of 1978, you cannot take original documents out of the White House with you when you leave the White House, whether you're the president of the United States or any of his aides. No, it's verboten under the law. Now, there are no criminal penalties for violating it, but why the former president packed up 20, nearly 30 some odd boxes of material when he had no right to do so? And that's what the government asserts, incidentally, in this filing. They say the former president asked for the return of the documents because, as he said in his filing, they were created during his administration, and the response of the government, in their filing was that's evidence that they aren't his. If they were developed in the White House during his time of presidency under the Presidential Records Act, they belong to the government, not to him.
So, there are. I don't know. Mike Davis, you worked in the White House, so you have experience with this. You understand the classification of documents and how they need to be kept. Here's Mike Davis, who runs Article 2. He was a clerk to Justice Gorsuch. Here's his take on it. Watch this.
They say he may have stole or misused government property under the Presidential Records Act and other statutes. That's just not possible. There's a 2012 decision by an Obama judge that former presidents can take personal records with them when they leave office. So there goes the obstruction allegations. It's legally impossible to obstruct non-crimes like they're trying to investigate here.
What do you say to that, Karl?
Well, I'm not certain that that's accurate. Again, I'm not a lawyer, and Mark Davis is, but the decision in question, the Obama judge decision, was involving, as I understand it, audio tapes of interviews conducted by an author of President Obama during his time in office. The tapes were in the possession of the author, who was doing an oral history of President Obama, and there was a FOIA request to turn them over, and the court held those were not governmental documents; they were the property of the author and of the oral history, and they were in his possession, not in President Obama's possession. I don't know of a single opinion that says that documents that are created by a White House during the time of a presidency are anything but government documents. You know, what we've got here are, at least from the classified issue, look, those don't come from the White House. They come from elsewhere in the executive branch. And where the authority is for the president to have a possession of them, I don't know. But we're going to get a quick answer, because that's one of the two questions that's involved here. The former president, President Trump, is saying, I want a special master. And he's also saying, I want you to return all those documents. And we're going to get a quick answer on that.
Yeah. It's interesting. I got to go. But it's interesting. Everyone remembers with Hillary Clinton that she also didn't turn over all the documents, because then the FBI found that several thousand work-related documents were not turned over. And then we were told that that was not, nobody would prosecute the case based on it. She also they selectively gave documents over and then, quote, cleaned their devices in such a way as to preclude a complete forensic recovery. So we've been down this road before.
Classified material. And classified material was included in all of that. And classified material passed over a private email server network that she created.
All right. Thank you so much, Karl. Great to have you with us.
You bet.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.